Welcome to GZERO World. I'm Ian Bremmer, and today we're looking at a legal battle over press freedom happening more than 8,000 miles away from here in Manila, and why it has implications for free speech and journalism all across the globe. My guest is Maria Ressa. She's the founder of an online news organization that has drawn the ire of Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte, putting her in grave danger. Then we've got puppets.
This is useless. Maybe I should just stay in power forever after all.
October 2015, a journalist from Manila sits down to interview a Filipino mayor who boasts of killing criminals, personally.
So no qualms about killing killers.
Yes, of course. I must admit that I have killed.
That was the second time Maria Ressa interviewed Rodrigo Duterte, then considering a run for the presidency of the Philippines.
Is that a possibility?
I told you to avoid me. I'm telling the Filipino people, wag ako, it's gonna be bloody.
It's a possibility.
By May 2016, Duterte had won the election and would follow through on his promise, a brutal drug war and extrajudicial killings. The country's independent institutions would also be compromised, including the free press.
As a matter of fact, I'm challenging you guys. Kill journalism, stop journalism in this country.
Since his interview with Ressa, the Philippines' most recognizable journalist and a Time Magazine Person of the Year, she has been accused of everything from fraud to shilling for the CIA. The news organization she helped form, Rappler, has also faced 11 government investigations and court cases following its critical coverage.
Freedom of the press is the foundation of every single right you have as a Filipino citizen.
The chips kept falling. In May, the country's most influential news broadcaster was shut down. A month later, an anti-terror bill that allows for warrantless arrests, widespread surveillance, and criminalizes certain free speech sailed through Congress. The Philippines can take a number. Governments across the globe have clamped down on journalists, while those across the region, including Cambodia, Thailand, and Malaysia, have all expanded executive powers and restricted free speech, particularly those critical of their handling of the pandemic.
So it's kind of like getting COVID-19. You know, it's meant to kill you if you're one of the 4% where it can be lethal. But if you survive it, it could also damage you irreparably. Our press freedom has already been rolled back because we are a cautionary tale.
In June, Ressa and a colleague were convicted of violating a criminal cyber libel law. Their conviction hinged on a story Rappler published about local corruption, but that story was written in 2012, well before the libel law was ever passed. It was only after fixing a typo in the story 2 years later that state prosecutors saw their chance, considering the article republished. Charges soon followed.
Are we a democracy or not? Let us do our jobs.
Ressa now faces a prison term in what's considered a key test for press freedoms both in the Philippines and abroad. She joins me now. Maria Ressa, very good to be with you. It's become pretty clear to all of us following the Philippines that your job as a journalist broadly is becoming a form of political protest in your country. Tell us what that is like. What's life like for you right now on a day-to-day basis?
It's almost like you're sick. You're sick. Some days you wake up and you feel okay. And other days you wake up and it's not so good. And it doesn't go away, right? It doesn't go away. So this is a marathon. And I feel like I would like to just do the stories. Even the way other journalists introduce me now, the critic of President Duterte, those things made me uncomfortable because I didn't set out to be a critic. I set out to be exactly what I am, which is a journalist. But as time went on, the impunity in the drug war, the impunity that we looked at in the propaganda war, and then obviously the government not wanting us to do these stories, the weaponization of social media, followed by the weaponization of the law against us. And then when I was arrested, all of a sudden, I was unshackled. We were seeing things firsthand. I don't have to ask the person being arrested, whether you're innocent or guilty or look for documents, I was being arrested and I knew I wasn't guilty. So that was really a transformation for me when I realized that I will speak, and I will speak because it's my rights that are getting violated, and I see the blatant abuse of power and its impact on press freedom.
What role do you play both for yourself as well as for society in the Philippines now that's very different than what you would do if you were a journalist?
It's a huge responsibility, and it makes me uncomfortable. I'm not an activist, but I suppose in the battle for facts, in the battle for truth, all journalists are activists. And that's the other thing we have to embrace is how journalism is changing, has changed, and how power has changed. And then the huge role of technology that has enabled the rise of these populist authoritarian style leaders.
You know, it's interesting that, of course, your leader, Rodrigo Duterte, who, I mean, in many ways fits this mold of self-styled populist. I mean, he speaks in very crude terms and he's very much a law and order candidate, you know, lock them all up. But he's very popular, right? And he remains very popular. And he has actually been fairly successful economically. He's not seen as enormously personally corrupt. I mean, he hasn't had the kind of problems that Bolsonaro in Brazil or Trump in the United States have had. And so, but I'd love to hear some of why you think he's done so well, why he's been so successful as leader of your country.
I think there are lots of similarities with the United States in the sense that there was a perfect storm that came in. Democracy, liberal democracy, failed to deliver its promise, not enough of the trickle-down effect. Simultaneous with that unhappiness is the complexity of the world. We started seeing this in 2014, I would say with Indian elections then, that, you know, because the world has become so complex, people want someone to help to just make those decisions. That was a factor in play. And then the biggest game changer, I think, is technology. And that comes from your country. Silicon Valley has made decisions that has impacted every single democracy, every nation around the world, right? When you talk about popularity, in our country, I would suggest that his popularity is buoyed by the propaganda machine on Facebook. And here's the Philippines, 109 million people. We have had endemic corruption, weak law enforcement. And President Duterte has molded this in a whole different way. He's increased the salaries of our military and our police. The police have led the charge in the killings of extrajudicial killings. The government denies this, of course, right? What they will say is that the police has killed 6,000 to 7,000 people. That's kind of a lot on its own, but human rights activists will say at least 27,000 people have been killed.
Now that we're in the middle of this pandemic, how would you say that has affected life on the ground politically?
Fighting a virus means the government must deliver. And when it doesn't deliver, real people die, right? So that's the first. So it's a huge challenge for the Duterte administration. And it reacted the way you would expect, which is, you know, it has a hammer. The COVID-19 response is led by retired military generals. So we have a very militaristic response and not enough doctors involved in this. We're now in the 15th week of a lockdown, and the incidence of COVID continue to increase. When the lockdown happened, the number of tests that had been done at that point, this is in March, was about 12 tests for every million Filipinos. Now we're at about 6,400 for every million Filipinos, but still not enough, right? And President Duterte, in late night ramblings, has told the police that if Filipinos break quarantine, that they should, and these are his words, shoot them dead. And that's actually fueled Filipinos who are stuck at home to go out online, and for the first time, the day after President Duterte said that, hashtag Oust Duterte now trended #1 overnight and globally as well. That would have been unheard of.
Now, you said recently, I'm going to read a quote to you, I can't remember a day when I didn't pick up my phone and get inundated with hate. So you worried about personal security, folks knowing exactly where you live, or is it really just as long as I don't look at my phone, that I can kind of put this away for a period of time? How much is that?
No, unfortunately, the online violence is real. It started in 2016, and it started with the threats, and then became very creative. Then I became every animal you can think of, and then it just got really. It used gender, my facial features, my skin color, and it's horrid in that sense. And it's like it's meant to incite hate. And that's part of what I feel the platforms are responsible for, because they've allowed it to happen and they allow it to continue. So social media is a behavioral modification system, and essentially it knows us better than we know ourselves, because we put it in, uses machine learning and then artificial intelligence, and then sells our weakest moment, our most vulnerable moment, to a message to the highest bidder, whether that's a government or a company. The message seeded in 2016 was, Maria Ressa is not a journalist, she's a criminal. And it was the first time you read it, it's like, doesn't matter, because it's so ridiculous. She's obviously not a criminal. Look at her track record. Track record doesn't matter anymore in the age of social media. But repeated a million times, followed in 2017 by the same words coming out of government officials and President Duterte himself saying that. And then in 2018, the 11 cases and investigations. In 2019, the arrest warrants. And then in 2020, a conviction. So, what's real and what's not? Criminal, journalist, or criminal, right? That is how we change reality. That is how death by 1,000 cuts happens of our democracy. That is how President Duterte is the best leader the Philippines has ever had. It's buoyed by this propaganda machine. This is huge, and I think it's not just the Philippines. These cheap armies on social media have rolled democracy back all around the world. Let's look at the United States. That's a perfect example, right, of something that was seeded in 2016 and then erupts in 2020. The Mueller report. This is already documented that Russian disinformation networks targeted Americans. And one of the fissure lines of society that was pounded on both sides, split wide open, it is race and identity. Black Lives Matter was targeted in 2016. And here we go, right? So again, this stuff that happens on social media, it erupts in the real world.
What's the response been that you've gotten from Facebook execs?
I think there are individuals inside Facebook who know how bad it is. I mean, look, this is part of the reason. In 2016, I didn't really think we had to go to regulation, because I thought that tech people are like journalists, like we will self-regulate, right? Journalists were the gatekeepers for many, 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 many years, right? And we had that principle. We had standards and ethics, the mission of journalism. We protected the public sphere. Well, we lost that power to tech. Tech took it, made money off of it, but abdicated responsibility for protecting the public sphere. So
yeah, they do not want to be journalists. They do not want to be treated as journalists. They have no interest in it.
And yet they're the world's largest distributor of news, right? And I've met Mark Zuckerberg. I think he's a really bright young man. And when I met him, I thought, my God, he's facile, he's agile. And yet he doesn't know enough to protect against his own weaknesses. This idea where he says this is a freedom of speech issue is just garbage. This is not a freedom of speech issue. This is a distribution issue. Facebook and other social media platforms allow lies laced with anger and hate to spread faster and further than facts, which are really boring. You cannot have integrity of markets. You cannot have integrity of elections if you make facts debatable.
So it appears the Philippines government right now is adopting this tactic of censorship by trial. You've had to post bail 8 times just to stay out of jail. What's the state of play on that right now?
I mean, it really is a war of attrition, right? I think that's what the government had hoped. But, you're forged in fire. I have 8 arrest warrants. I am out on bail for 8. In order to be able to leave to travel, I have to ask court permission, right? So I think about that all the time, and I had to grapple with going to jail. I mean, this particular cyber libel is 6 years, but if you take all of those cases and the maximum jail sentence of each one, it's almost 100 years. I think the journey is the battle, right? Just challenging every step where someone must sign something that is unconstitutional. At least there's a record of that. And then I have to just trust both in the men and women in the judiciary and in Filipinos. I have to trust that Filipinos care about democracy. I'd say this is true about the Duterte administration. It's managing on the 3 C's: corrupt, coerce, co-opt. And if you're neither of those, then you become a cautionary tale. I'm the cautionary tale for journalists.
Are you surprised that they haven't actually just shut Rappler down?
It seems important to President Duterte to have the veneer of rule of law. And all of the attacks against its perceived critics have been led by the Office of the Solicitor General, right? It's been a law. I call it, the law has been bent to the point that it's broken. In some days I wake up and I think, why don't we just declare that we're a dictatorship? Then it makes it easier. Then we don't have to pretend the Philippine Constitution, which is patterned after the U.S. with our Bill of Rights, then we don't have to pretend that these rights are there for every Filipino. But, as long as we have them, I have no choice but to take the position I've taken. And I just draw a deep breath, and keep going.
Maria Ressa, I can say definitively not a terrorist. I think we could make that pretty clear around the world. And wish you luck and Godspeed. Good to talk to you today.
Good to talk to you. Thanks, Ian.
And before we go, a lighter note. I've got your puppet regime.
After 15 years in power, Angela Merkel is stepping down. But with no clear successors in Germany, she's widening her search.
Yeah, okay, so what makes you think you are qualified to run Germany?
Well, I have a proven track record of uniting the right.
Next! Angela, I will get it done.
Get what done?
Well, I'm neither Christian nor democratic nor in a union, but what the heck, I'm up for a challenge.
Well, Germany seems to be a country that doesn't mind if its leaders have ovaries, so...
Decades of experience. I bring decades of experience. This is useless! Maybe I should just stay in power forever after all.
Yes, Angela, yes. Surrender to the impulse. Surrender. Yes. Yes, arise. Together we will make it.
Week. Come back next week, and if you like what you see, take a minute, maybe 55 seconds, 50 if you type fast. Sign up for GZERO's most excellent morning newsletter. It's called Signal.